All right, good evening, everybody. Back by popular demand, it's the return of the shirt. All right. Hope everyone is doing well tonight. We're also going to introduce something new. Not sure how long we'll do it for, but we'll do it for as long as we can. It's a little one of those ASMR things. Ready? Ah. ASMR, right? All right. So today we're going over punitive damages in contract. We are dealing with one case and one case only today. We are dealing with Formosa Plastics Corporation USA versus Presidio Engineers and Contractors Incorporated, the Texas case from the old year of 1988. Yep, more punitive. So Abbott, the justice, who is not the same, he may be related to, but he's not the same Governor Abbott of Texas. He's a different Texas Abbott guy. So, all right. In 1989, Formosa, which is Formosa Plastics Incorporated USA, called to as Formosa now, began a large construction expansion project at its facility in Point Comfort, Texas, Presidio. Oh, Point Comfort, Texas, period. Wait, other way. That's better. Presidio received an invitation to bid from Formosa on that part of the project requiring the construction of 300 concrete foundations. The invitation was accompanied by a bid package containing a technical drawing, specific citations, general information, and a sample contract. The bid package also contained certain representations about the foundation job. The representations included that 1. Presidio would arrange and be responsible for the scheduling, ordering, and delivery of all materials, including those that were paid for by Formosa. 2. That work was to progress continually from commencement until completion. And 3. The job was scheduled to commence on July 16th, 1990. And be completed 90 days later on October 15th, 1990. Presidio's president, Bob Burnett, testified that he relied on these representations in preparing Presidio's bid. Because the bid package provided that the contractor would be responsible for all weather and all other unknown delays, he added another 30 days to his estimate of the job's scheduled completion date. He submitted a bid on behalf of Presidio in the amount of $600,000. Because Presidio submitted the lowest bid, Formosa awarded Presidio the contract. Guess what happens next? The job was not completed in 120 days. Rather, the job took over 8 months to complete, more than twice Burnett's estimate and almost 3 times the scheduled time provided in the bid package. The delays caused Presidio to incur substantial additional costs that were not anticipated when Presidio submitted its bid. Presidio sued Formosa for breach of contract. Presidio also brought fraudulent inducement of contract and fraudulent performance of contract claims based on representations made by Formosa that Presidio discovered were false after commencing performance of the contract. Formosa counterclaimed for breach of contract, urging that Presidio had not properly completed some of its work. Presidio presented evidence to the jury that Formosa had an intentional, premeditated scheme to defraud the contractors working on its expansion project. Under the scheme, Formosa enticed contractors to make low bids by making misrepresentations in bidding packages regarding scheduling, delivery of materials, and responsibility for delayed damages. Jack Lynn, the director of Formosa's civil department, admitted that Formosa acted deceptively by representing that in the bid package that contractors would have the ability to schedule the delivery of concrete, when in truth Formosa had secretly decided to set up its own delivery schedule in order to save money. Formosa also scheduled multiple contractors doing mutually exclusive work to be in the same area at the same time. For instance, Formosa scheduled another contractor to install underground pipes in Presidio's work area at the same time that Presidio was supposed to be pouring foundations, which go on top of the fucking pipes. The court doesn't say the last part, but you get it. Thomas Peña, Formosa's inspector, admitted that Formosa knew that contractors would be working right on top of each other, but this information was not passed on to any of those contractors. Of course, once the contractors were on the job, they would realize that due to such unexpected delays caused by Formosa, their bids were inadequate. But when the contractors requested delay damages under the contract, Formosa would rely on its superior economic position and offer the contractors far less than the full and fair value of those delay damages. It's fucked up. Formosa, in fact, Ron Robichaud, Robichau, I guess to say Francais, Ron Robichaud, head of Formosa's Contract Administrative Division, testified that Formosa, in an effort to lower costs, would utilize its economic superiority to string contractors along and force them to settle. Robichaud added that if a contractor continued to complain, then Formosa would take the contract from him and make him sue, make sure that he would lose his money. Under this scheme, Formosa allegedly stood to save millions of dollars on its $1.5 billion expansion project. The jury found that Formosa defrauded Presidio and awarded Presidio $1.5 million based on its findings that Formosa's fraud was done willfully, wantonly, intentionally, and with a conscious indifference to the rights of Presidio. The jury further awarded Presidio $10 million in exemplary damage. Exemplary damages is another word for punitive damages. So, punitive, the word means punish. Punitive damages, as we've talked about before on the stream, are damages to punish you, to deter your conduct in the future, and to make others who might be doing the dumb shit you just did not want to do it in the future because they will be punished likewise. Exemplary damages. Exemplary, as in to make an example of you. Same basis, same idea. We're going to punish you so other people don't do it again. Other one, we'll make an example of you so other people don't do it again. Right? Same principle. Punitive and exemplary damages are more or less synonymous. To be exact, punitive damages are a type of exemplary damages. There are others, but they're synonymously used in this court filing. Right. Based on his findings that Formosa's fraud was Additionally, the jury found that Formosa breached its contract with Presidio, causing $1.267 million in damages. On the other hand, the jury also concluded that Presidio did not fully comply with the contract, causing Formosa $107,000 in damages. The trial court suggested a remitterer reducing the tort damages of $700,000 and the contract damages to $461,000, which Presidio accepted. Based on Presidio's election to recover tort rather than contract damages, the trial court rendered a judgment in favor of Presidio for $700,000 in actual damages, $10 million in punitive damages, prejudgment interest, attorney's fees, and court costs. The damages caused by Presidio's breach of contract were offset against the judgment. The Court of Appeals affirmed. Now Formosa asserts that Presidio's fraud claim cannot be maintained because Presidio loses what were purely economic losses related to performance and the subject matter of the contract. Formosa contends that our decision, the court's decision in Southwestern Bell Telephone Company versus Delaney, 91 Texas case, compels us to examine the substance of Presidio's tort claim to determine whether the claim is in reality a repackaged breach of contract claim. Remember, we talked before, you can't recover under tort and contract at the same time, so you got to pick a lane and stick with it. Formosa urges that in making this determination, we should analyze the nature of the alleged injury, the source of the breach duty, and whether the loss or risk of loss is contractually contemplated by the parties. Presidio counters that the Delaney-type analysis does not apply to fraud claims. For the reasons discussed below, we agree with Presidio. So Presidio is the guy who got fucked over by Formosa. Formosa's the baddie. Presidio's the poor contractors. The court, for the reasons that are coming up now, agreed with Presidio. Over the last 50 years, the court has analyzed the distinction between torts and contracts from two different perspectives. At first, we merely analyzed the source of the duty in determining whether an action sounded in tort or contract. Sound just means like whether it could properly be. So like, does that sound like a tort claim or does that sound like a contract claim? So the way the court would analyze those things is, are the harms that are laid out based upon some wrongdoing that's a tort action, or really based upon a breach of contract that maybe caused some harm? The court would apply a sounding analysis. In International Printing Pressmen and Assistants Union versus Smith, a 1946 case, the court held that, quote, an action in contract is for the breach of a duty arising out of that contract, whether it's an express duty or an implied duty, while an action in tort is for a breach of a duty imposed by law. So you can agree to stuff in contracts that would be illegal otherwise, but if you agree to it in a contemplated contract, it's okay. They're saying, no, torts are different than that, because torts are breaching a duty you didn't contractually agree to. They're breaching a duty that's imposed on them by the law itself, tort law in the state or the federal government's case. Later, we overlaid an analysis of the nature of the remedy sought by plaintiff. In Jim Walter Homes Incorporated versus Reed, a 1986 case, we recognized that while the contractual relationship of the parties could create duties under both contract and tort law, the nature of the injury most often determines which duties have been breached. When the injury is only the economic loss to the subject of a contract itself, the action sounds only in contract, not in tort. Because a mere breach of contract cannot support recovery of exemplary damages. So you don't get punitives in a contract, right? Usually. And because the plaintiffs did not prove a distinct tortious injury with actual damages, we render judgment that the plaintiffs take nothing on their exemplary damages claim nor their award. We analyzed both the source of the duty and the nature of the remedy in Delaney. Delaney asserted that Bell was negligent in failing to publish its Yellow Pages advertisement as promised. The trial court rendered judgment for Delaney, and the Court of Appeals affirmed. This court, however, held that the claim sounded in contract, not negligence, and accordingly rendered judgment in favor of Bell. We provided the following guidelines on distinguishing contract and tort causes of action. Quote, if the defendant's conduct, such as negligently burning down a house, will give rise to liability, independent of the fact that a contract existed between parties, the plaintiff's claim may also sound in tort. Conversely, if the defendant's conduct, such as failing to publish an advertisement, would give rise to liability only because it breaches the parties' agreement, the plaintiff's claim ordinarily sounds only in contract. In determining whether the plaintiff may recover on the tort theory, it is also instructive to examine the nature of the plaintiff's loss. When the only loss or damage is a subject matter of the contract, the plaintiff's action is ordinarily only on the contract. And you killed my little brother. Delaney, in applying these guidelines, we first determined that Bell's duty to publish Delaney's advertisement arose solely from the contract to do so. We then concluded that Delaney's damages, lost profits, were only for economic loss caused by Bell's failure to perform the contract. Thus, while Delaney pleaded his action as one of negligence, he clearly sought to recover the benefit of his bargain with Bell, such as Bell's failure to publish the advertisement was not a tort but a breach of contract. More recently, in Crawford versus Ace Sign Inc. 96 Texas case, we considered the intersection of the Deceptive Trade Practices Act and contract laws. Ace Sign sued Bell for omission of a Yellow Page advertisement alleging negligence, DTPA, misrepresentation, and breach of contract. Bell stipulated the contract breach and was granted summary judgment on Ace Sign's DTPA and negligence claims. The Court of Appeals reversed the trial court's judgment on the DTPA, which is the Deceptive Trade Practice Act, right? That's what DTPA is. But this court then reversed the Court of Appeals. We know that under Delaney, we were to consider both the source of the defendant's duty to act, whether it arose solely out of contract or from some common law duty, and the nature of the remedy sought by plaintiff. We then examined the relationship of the DTPA and contract law, concluding that an allegation of a mere breach of contract without more does not violate DTPA, the Deceptive Trade Practices Act. We held that Because the alleged representations of Bell were simply representations that it would fulfill its contractual duty to publish an advertisement, and a mere failure to later perform a promise does not constitute a misrepresentation. It's not like you said I was going to get a fucking plane ticket to Bermuda, and I got in the plane. I actually ended up going to Tokyo, right? It's saying I'm going to take you to Bermuda, and the plane doesn't take off at all. It's not that I said something and I lied to you and sent you somewhere else. It's that I told you you were going somewhere, or I told you you were getting something, and you didn't get shit. So that's the difference between a deceptive trade practice and a mere failure to perform a contractually obligated duty. Right. We reject the application of Delaney to preclude tort damages in fraud cases. Texas basically is saying, so if there is fraud, we can start getting the punitive damage, actually, right? Texas law has long imposed a duty to abstain from inducing another to enter into a contract through the use of fraudulent misrepresentations. As a rule, a party is not bound by a contract procured by fraud. Moreover, it is well established that the legal duty to not fraudulently procure a contract is a separate and independent legal duty from the duties established by the contract itself. This court has also repeatedly recognized that a fraud claim can be based on a promise made with no intention of performing, irrespective of whether the promise is later subsumed within a contract. Our prior decisions clearly establish that tort damages are not precluded simply because a fraudulent representation causes only an economic loss. Almost 150 years ago, this court held in Graham, no relation, versus Roeder in 1849. Well, maybe it is a relation. I don't think so, but doubt it. That tort damages were recoverable based upon plaintiff's claim that he was fraudulently induced to exchange a promissory note for a tract of land. Although the damages sustained by the plaintiff were purely economic, we held that tort damages, including exemplary damages, punitive damages, were recoverable. Since Graham, the case, not me, this court has continued to recognize the propriety of fraud claims sounding in tort, despite the fact that aggrieved parties' losses were only economic losses. Moreover, we have held that in similar contexts, tort damages are not precluded from a tortious interference with a contract claim, notwithstanding the fact that the damages for the tort claim compensated for the same economic loss that were recoverable under a breach of contract claim. Accordingly, tort damages are recoverable for a fraudulent inducement claim, irrespective of whether the fraudulent representation was later subsumed into a contract or whether a plaintiff only suffers economic loss related to the subject matter of that contract. Allowing the recovery of fraud damages sounding in tort only when a plaintiff suffers an injury that is distinct and separate from any economic loss that is recoverable under a breach of contract claim is inconsistent with this well-established law, and also ignores the fact that an independent legal duty, separate and apart from the existence of the contract itself, precludes the use of fraud to induce a binding agreement. We conclude that if a plaintiff presents legally sufficient evidence on each of the elements of a fraudulent inducement claim, any damages suffered as a result of the claim of fraud sound in tort, not in contract. We thus conclude that Presidio has a viable fraud claim and that it can assert it against Formosa. However, this conclusion does not end our inquiry. We must also determine whether legally sufficient evidence supports the jury's fraud and damage findings. One section left, folks. One and only one. How's everybody's night doing tonight? It's a Thursday night. It's late at night. It's been a long day for everyone. But tomorrow's Friday. It's Friday. Which just means more class for me. We are all tired. We've been tired. We done been tired. All right. All right. Many people tell me that Friday is the best day. Friday's the most excellent. Many people tell me Friday is the best day. Friday is the best day. It's not a very good accent when I'm doing it through my shirt. It doesn't work like that. Anyways, 3. A fraud action requires a material misrepresentation, which was false and was either known to be false when made or was asserted without any actual knowledge of its truth, which was intended to be acted upon, which was relied upon, and which caused injury. Hey, there's the thing we were talking about earlier. This is from a case called Sears and Roebuck Company versus Meadows, a 1994 case. Sears, the company that used to do family pictures and stuff inside their locations, and they were partner under the same umbrella as Kmart. And when Kmart crashed, Sears crashed, and there are no longer Kmarts or Searses except for vacant buildings in some corners of West Virginia that are empty and probably haunted by ghosts and or homeless people. I guess not haunted by homeless people, just inhabited by them. Different. A promise of future performance constitutes an actionable misrepresentation if the promise was made with no intention of performing it at the time it was made. So exactly. So if I'm selling you a ticket to go to Taiwan, right? And I have no intention, I don't even own a plane. I don't own a plane. I don't own a travel agency. I'm just like, Canva, print me something. Ticket to Taiwan. Here's a ticket to Taiwan. It'll be $300. I have no intention of actually getting you to Taiwan. I have no idea how to get you to Taiwan. Right? But when I'm telling you I'm selling you a ticket to Taiwan, I have no intention of trying to get you to Taiwan. I have no intention of getting you anywhere. It's not a real ticket. It's not for a real plane. It's something I made up to get your money and give you a worthless piece of paper that looks like a ticket. However, the mere failure to perform a contract is not evidence of fraud. So if I have a plane that goes to Taiwan and I'm selling you a legit ticket to it and the plane breaks a wing when it runs into something when it's shuttling down the taxi and you don't get to go to Taiwan, that was not a fraudulent misrepresentation. I wanted you to go to Taiwan. I had the ability to get you there. Something else happened. So you can sue me for breach of contract for not getting you to Taiwan, like the ticket, like the contract of which the ticket represented the agreement to, right? Promised to do. So you can sue me for breach of contract. You can't sue me for fraudulent misrepresentation about that ticket because that ticket was what it purported to be, and I had the ability to get you to Taiwan. If I didn't have that and lied to you and said, this is Taiwan, I don't own a plane or have the ability to do that, that would be the fraudulent misrepresentation. That's the distinction here, right? Okay, rather, Presidio had to present evidence that Formosa made representations with the intent to deceive and with no intention of performing as represented. Moreover, the evidence presented must be relevant to Formosa's intent at the time the representation was made. We conclude, damn right you do, that Presidio presented legally sufficient evidence that Formosa made representations with no intention of performing as represented in order to induce Presidio to enter into the contract at a lower bid price. The bid package and the contract Formosa represented that Presidio would have control of delivery of the concrete necessary for the project. Remember, they said you can have concrete whenever you want. Well, schedule would be great, right? But actually, they were scheduling people to put piping in the concrete guide to go on top of. They knew that they were doing that when they did it. So that is a fraudulent misrepresentation at the time the contract was agreed to, was bargained for and assented to, right? At the time of formation of the contract, they knew they were going to fuck them over. In contravention, meaning in going against, in doing the opposite of this representation, Formosa decided 2 weeks before the contract was signed to take over delivery of the concrete without informing Presidio. Jack Lynn, Formosa's civil department director, testified that Formosa, in an effort to save money, decided to take over the concrete delivery and set up its own delivery schedule. However, Presidio was not informed of this change until after the contract was signed. Lynn admitted that Formosa acted deceptively by taking over the concrete delivery and scheduling when the bid package expressly provided, meaning it stated exactly that the contractor, which would have been Presidio, would have control over the delivery schedule. He further admitted that Formosa knew that Presidio would rely on this representation when it presented its bid. Presidio's president, Bob Burnett, testified that Presidio did in fact actually rely on this representation in preparing its bid. Burnett further testified that every concrete pour was delayed 1 to 2 days, where Presidio waited for Formosa to obtain the requested concrete. Because Burnett did not calculate such delays into his bid, the actual cost of the project far exceeded the contract price. Thus, legally sufficient evidence was provided to support the jury's finding of fraud. We need not consider whether any other representations Formosa allegedly made were fraudulent. We have enough on those grounds alone to find that Formosa acted fraudulently in the formation or the pre-formation representations of the contract with Presidio, and Presidio relied upon those representations to say, yes, we'll do this contract with you. And it was all a bunch of shit. So there is the famous case of Formosa Plastics Corporation USA versus Presidio Engineers and Contractors Incorporated, a 98 Texas case on punitive damages when a contract claim really sounds of a tort, which more or less means fraud in a contract case, or tortious interference with a contract, which aren't really contract claims. They're tort claims that have to deal with contracts, but they're outside of the four corners of the contract itself. So that's all we have for tonight, folks. You all have a great one. Make sure to tip your bartenders, tip your waitresses. Don't tip your airplane pilots. They don't like that. It seems weird. But hopefully they don't crash. Have a good one. God bless. Be good. And we will see you next time. Next time.